Hello, my name is Beth Hatch. I am doing my presentation on change management, a study in public libraries for my capstone project for Lake Erie College for the Master in Professional Studies in Communication. So my topic includes an overview of change management, including why change fails, an overview of change management strategy, specifically looking at the areas of defining success, leadership's role, communication, employee engagement and training, and then talking a little bit about implementing change in libraries and why that's slightly different than change management in regular organizations or for-profit businesses. So first, to understand why change fails, John Kotter is one of the leading experts in change management theory, and his book, Leading Change, is one of the top books that are recommended for change management strategies, broken down into 8 steps. But one of the reasons I like John Kotter's books is because in the beginning, he explains exactly why 70% of all change efforts fail. That's a pretty staggering statistic if you think about how many organizations need to go through change in order to be successful. So he breaks down the reasons for the mistakes that companies make. One is not establishing a great enough sense of urgency, not creating a powerful enough guiding coalition. Leaders can't manage change on their own. Lacking a vision, really being able to communicate effectively and helping people understand what the vision for change is, or even under communicating the vision, not being consistent, not being able to communicate that in an effective way. Some of it is also not removing obstacles. These are things that stand in the way of completing the change, whether it's an implementation of new technology or resources that staff need, or even just miscommunication. That stands in the way of creating change. Not creating short-term wins. It's very important for staff to feel that the change is able to be completed. It's something that's attainable. And so if there are not short-term goals that staff can achieve, sometimes the change feels overwhelming where staff can't feel that they are going to be able to accomplish it, that it's just too much. And that obviously staying the same is easier. And then declaring victory too soon is probably the last one where don't count your chickens before they hatch, making sure that you not only clearly define the vision, but setting those goals and knowing exactly what you need to complete before you declare victory too soon. So I'm going to talk about 4 different things, and we're talking about change management strategy. One is defining success. It's very important to know, like, what exactly do we need to do to be successful? What exactly is the leadership's or leader's role in change management? What specifically you need in terms of communication to be successful? And the biggest one, even though it's last, is employee engagement. So, defining success, I mean, first, it's important to understand why companies need change. And so, really, it comes down to the fact that we have to adapt to new customer expectations and demands. There are changes to technology always. There's a shifting labor market, and businesses always have to continually look for ways to improve efficiency, reduce costs, and increase profitability and financial sustainability. Now, one of the things that I mentioned in my paper that I'll reiterate here is, for libraries specifically, um, change, it tends to happen slower because there's not as much a drive for a sense of urgency. I mean, unless there's some kind of major budget cut, like a state budget cut to the Public Library Fund in Ohio, that we have seen. The last time we saw that was in 2008, 2009. Libraries tend to be slow to change simply because there isn't this sense of urgency. However, one of the areas that I think libraries really need to look at is that there are always changing customer expectations. As we're looking around to businesses and companies as they're adapting to new customer demands. So, for example, one of the things that we saw that happened out of the pandemic was that more and more people were getting things delivered, and that is you can get pretty much anything delivered to you except for library books or library materials. And really, it's just one example of how libraries have been kind of slow to the take on, where you can get anything delivered by any other company, and, pretty much any other organization. But libraries typically only deliver to homebound, which is people that actually can't leave their houses. So, again, that's an example of, a way that a company would need to adapt and change. But again, there's no sense of urgency. We still see people coming here. We've seen about a 20% drop in visits and use of our collections, but that doesn't seem to be as much of a necessity or urgency. There's no financial implications for that. Really, you see sort of like, so what? So what companies need to do to be successful, or why they need to change? They really need to keep their employees and engaged and to be adaptive. And so a hallmark of successful change is that employees change their behavior. They should be able to adapt quickly and work together toward a common vision and goals. You don't want an organization or a company to be complacent. Processes and workflow efficiency. Obviously, we want to take advantage of different kinds of technology to make things efficient. When employees are able to adapt their behaviors, especially quickly, better processes and new workflows will create that better efficiency, will save the organization time and money while providing better customer service, which is really what we should be aiming for. And then finally, profitability and sustainability. Libraries obviously aren't looking at profitability. We're nonprofit. However, sustainability, especially financial sustainability, when we're looking at the changing and shifting labor markets, we have to define our success by being able to be financially stable and being able to grow and pay our people. So the definition of success will most always equate to a better financial position for any organization and sustainability of an organization. So leadership's role is incredibly important. One is really creating a vision for change. You have to be able to not only create a vision, you need to be able to communicate that vision consistently. And so great leadership is imperative for change efforts to succeed because you are the one driving the change. The onus is on the leader to get middle managers and employees to change their behavior and their attitudes to make the change happen. You can say you want something to change, you can say you want to do something differently, but unless you can motivate people and create that vision, they're not going to do it. They have to be motivated to be able to do it. So in order to do this and creating a vision for change, you can do this in 3 steps. So the one, which Kotter emphasizes this as well, as creating a sense of urgency. 50% of companies, according to Kotter's book, fail in the first step because they don't communicate the potential or imminent threats to motivate people to change. Like I said, it is more difficult to create a sense of urgency in a nonprofit organization, especially when you don't have these looming budget cuts. However, we are an extremely competitive organization, and so we can motivate people to compete with other libraries, and creating this sense of wanting to be the best. But you have to define what that means. If you look around at what other libraries are doing, and you can say, look at all this stuff, look at their statistics, look at their circulation, look at this new service that they have, and we're not doing that. Now, obviously, showing data sometimes isn't enough, and so making the problem visible is the next piece that is going to be incredibly important. So, and I've experienced this myself in my organization. So if people are not motivated by data or believe that the threat isn't severe enough, it's important to put leaders to put employees face first into the problem for them to see it and want to act. One of the articles that I read was talking about Brad Britton, who was the police chief for the New York City Police Department in a time when they were one of the worst police departments, but in one of the worst crime-ridden cities in New York City. And he put his officers, instead of allowing them to commute to work via their own personal vehicles, he made them ride the subway system so that they could see. So even though the data wasn't showing that there were these massive crimes, when they rode the subway system, they knew it felt unsafe. And so they were able to see the problem firsthand. So in the case of my organization, one of the things that we saw was that we have a 60% decline in our DVDs, Blu-ray, and CD collection circulation. And we have one whole department devoted to that one specific collection, about $400,000 a year to staff this department to basically watch over a collection that's no longer performing. So it was a very difficult thing for people to say. If you share this data, they really don't see it because they're still serving people as they're coming in the department. So obviously that's one area and I'll share that example later of how we made it real. And then third is creating a coalition. An individual person cannot push change along, and definitely not push change down. So leaders need to identify those who believe in the change and create a guiding coalition who are motivated and can persuade other people to act as well. That's incredibly important. So one of the things that I do in my organization is that I will not try to push a change unless my administrative team and then my leadership team are at least 90% on board. And we spend a lot of time going through change efforts through administration and leadership first before we even decide to push it through. Because if I can't get buy-in from my top team, I know it's not going to work. So communication, obviously, communication is a cornerstone of any good organization. But the reason why communication is so important when you're leading a change effort is that you have to build consensus. This is also called buy-in. So consensus building, it's the process that involves a good faith effort to meet the interests of all the stakeholders. This includes employees and customers to seek, even if it's not unanimous, but it close to a unanimous agreement. And in order to do that, you have to do three things. Now, one area that organizations typically will trip up on is aligning their words with their actions. So this is an example of like an organization or a company going out, we've got to save money. We have to do some massive budget cuts. We have to lay off this entire department. And then they're giving their managers gigantic bonuses. That's misaligning what you're saying with what you're actually doing. If you come out and you set the vision and you say, this is what we need to do in order to stay competitive and to succeed and to avoid this threat, and then you do something that acts in the opposite way of what you're trying to accomplish, the employees will not believe you and will not buy into that vision. It also means you need to stay consistent in your messaging. There was a really good guide that I was given at a recent workshop called Change Questions. And it's basically a step-by-step guide on creating the key messages. And so you're able to stay consistent. And it's important because if your message changes, this is why, back in the political arena, you'd hear something called like a flip-flop, which is basically you take one stance on and say, and this is the reason why we're doing this. And then you change the reason for what you're doing. Again, you have to stay consistent in order for staff to go along and to believe. And then setting clearly defined goals. With the vision set forth and communicated effectively, you have to break it down into actionable goals. Like, we're going to do this, this, and this to reach this goal, or to make this change work. This is what we're doing. It has to seem plausible and it has to seem realistic. One of the other things that we talk a lot about are SMART goals: specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and timely. Specifically, what are we going to be doing to reach those goals? And lastly is just understanding that employee engagement is incredibly important, because success and change efforts cannot happen without staff. And for the employees to change their behavior and their attitude and to buy into the change and to make it happen, they need to feel that the change is going to pay off and that they're going to have a stake in the outcome. And in order to do that, there are things that leaders need to do to help them. So the first is to let them grieve. Now, of all the articles that I read, I didn't find a whole lot other than, just creating a sense of urgency and, getting buy-in, helping people understand the problem. But one of the books that we've been reading here at the Upper Arlington Public Library is Managing Transitions. And there's a whole part dedicated to understanding the psychology of change, and understanding that people need to grieve a loss before they can accept a new way of doing things. William Bridges and Susan Bridges spend a lot of time talking about um, the behavior and the attitudes that you can expect at the outset of a change, especially if it's a department merger or an organization merger, or somebody is changing into a new position or getting added responsibilities. They will tend to go through this grieving process, and understanding that one of the things they talk about in the book is that overreaction is just a normal reaction, and that it's just part of the grieving process. And they give you specific steps in order to help people move through this transition phase of grieving the loss, moving through the middle ground where you feel like you don't really know what to expect or what's going to be happening. There's a lot of fear and anxiety. And you can help aid that by giving them a role. They can't just be left alone to grieve and given no direction on how to fit into the new space and how they can be successful. So managers need to give staff a specific role to play in the change, whether it's problem solving or giving them new tasks. But it's important that staff have a feeling of ownership, rather than this is happening, do this, and let's move on. We have the goals that we need to meet, and bringing staff along to help them make those decisions will give them a sense of ownership and buy-in for whatever the change is going to be. Now, another reason why people grieve change is a sense of loss of expertise. So it's important to help staff create a sense of with professional development. So, for example, I can see that in some of our organizations, especially in libraries, people are no longer using like our research databases the way that they used to. We're seeing a pretty dramatic downturn in our movie and music collection. However, there's other things that we could be doing, like delivery of materials. We could be teaching computer classes. We could be helping people with their devices, but that requires new training and new skill and new ability. And it doesn't mean, and I know this is not on the slide, but one of the things that they talk about too is not denigrating the past, and making sure that people, and you want to celebrate the accomplishments that the staff have gotten up into that point, and that change is not an indicator of failure. It's just a new chapter. And you're going to be just as successful as you were before in this new way, and we're going to help you get there. So training and professional development is critical for employees to feel engaged and giving them a role in the change. So, how did I work to implement change management strategy in my organization? This is a topic that is near and dear to my heart. I worked at Perry Public Library in Northeast Ohio in Lake County. It was my first director job, and I made some mistakes when I worked there on implementing change very quickly with very little staff buy-in. I came in with a fresh set of eyes. I felt that I understood the problems. I sort of worked with staff, but they had a hard time seeing the problem, and so I said, "Well, I'm just going to push this through anyway." And it didn't end up going very well. I mean, the change happened, but employee engagement and morale was quite low. And so I was determined when I took the Upper Arlington Public Library job to do things differently. So I made sure to take my time. I spent 4 years observing the organization's proclivity for change, really spending the first year, almost year and a half, just observing the organization, getting to know my leadership team, doing some surveys. We did a Gallup poll to see, how engaged staff were to start with. We worked with staff to define the organization's culture, which also included the whether or not they were ready for change, wanting to improve communication and identifying areas for improvement and efficiency. One of the things I definitely noticed when I started was that we needed training for our leadership team, our middle managers, to help them facilitate the changes that we knew were coming, and creating that shared vision. So the first step was using a guide called Building a Culture of Distinction. This was a facilitator's guide for defining organizational culture and managing change. I led the library through the culture of distinction process, including staff surveys and understanding our philosophy, our priorities, and facilitated 2 workshops with the leadership team on understanding that process, and then doing a staff survey to see in communication how well our behavior, this is who we say we are, but does our behavior align with who we say we are? We believe that we're a great place to work. We believe that, um, that means that we respect one another, that we have staff have a positive attitude, that we like to collaborate with each other, that we value open and transparent communication, and that we hold each other accountable. So when the survey results came back, we saw that we had some work to do, that even though this is who we want to be, there were some aspirational goals in there that we needed to do some more work, which is where the Internal Communications Committee came out to help us create a scope to better our internal communication. So understanding that our leadership team needed help leading staff through change, especially in the area of communication, I changed the format of our leadership team meetings, which was me just recapping what happened at the board meeting and then doing like a round robin. So we started to work through the book Managing Transition by William Bridges and Susan Bridges, and also conversations worth having. One of the areas, one of our goals or areas of a great place to work is accountability. But what I was finding was that managers had a really hard time having difficult conversations with staff, and staff didn't feel safe to be able to have conversations, very candid conversations with their managers. So using conversations worth having helped my managers learn appreciative inquiry technique to help them have those difficult conversations and never assuming bad intent, but just really being curious and staying above the line when having those conversations and getting down to how staff actually are thinking about something. And doing all of those things only after we understood the organization, trained our leadership team. Now we are working with that base on culture and communication, conducting usability study of all 3 of our locations to see what areas could be improved and how we could make things more efficient. We did a data study of all of our collections and trends, and a 10-year forecast of our revenue and expenditures to see where we were going in the future. Our 10-year master facilities plan is on its way, and so we know that there's going to be significant changes. And so now is the time that I am creating a vision along with my board of trustees and a citizens task force to create this vision and implement that with staff, while also bringing them along. We facilitated workshops with our architects, with each one of our staff at each location, to get their ideas in how they feel that our building should be arranged and what areas that we need to improve. So that concludes my presentation on change management and my study for the Upper Arlington Public Library. I plan on following up with my professor after my course or after my 10-year master facility plan is over to show how well we succeeded. So thank you, and that is my presentation. If you have any questions, you can email me at bhatch@ualibrary.org.